Okay, here we are again. Welcome back, everybody. This is the We Quit Booze Brothers, which is a podcast where we try to have honest, no fluff conversations about our various experiences of quitting alcohol. And with me, as always, is my brother Matt. Hello, Matt.
Good morning, Mark. Good morning, everyone. Yes, we are back to share our thoughts and ideas and help, hopefully, around drinking, sobriety, all that sort of stuff. So we have a good topic, hopefully, for you, as we always try to do so. One that we picked up ourselves. We do look at your comments. We do pick up the kind of themes that you're after, and we think they're absolutely fantastic. So this week we picked one ourselves, but I think a really, really important one. Certainly it played a big part in my sobriety. So I'll hand back to you, Mark, and we can
All
kick
right,
off today.
we'll do the normal format. Yeah, so it's going to be a bit of a riff, I think, this one because it's a bit of a
Definitely.
mashup of a few topics which affect anyone who quits drinking. But both you and I went through this, and it's a sort of fairly broad topic. But I think the conversation we wanted to have today was just navigating through. Whether it's the early stages, whether you've just quit, like how do you kind of live with your no drinkingness? How do you sort of deal with temptation when it comes along? Triggering moments, things that might sort of send you off in a bit of a spiral down the why the fuck did I decide to not drink? This is awful, and just sort of go down that road. I think thinking about this conversation just prior to jumping on with you, Matt, I was sort of thinking, it's always important, I think, just for us to remind everybody that, look, this podcast is two brothers who happened to quit drinking alcohol, and
Yeah.
it's our experience. It doesn't mean that this is, de facto, that this is the sort of the only, people's experiences will vary, but I think it's just important that what we share is our experiences, what we felt, what we went
Yeah.
through. And I just wanted to share maybe two or three points that I think might help, that certainly I went through, that I sort of leaned on, I think, in moments where, there was temptation, or whether I was sort of feeling uncomfortable wearing this new sobriety skin. It's almost like you're suddenly, lurched into being a completely different person. I know you mentioned it last week. I always used to say, I almost want to see what the world looks like when I don't drink. What
Yeah.
is the? Oh, you say something?
No, I was just going to say actually that I think actually it was hard for you, harder maybe in a funny way, because in our family, in our entourage, you were the first really to make that change in your life. And, I, for one, gave you quite a bit of stick about it. It was a time when I was drinking a lot. Our parents were still drinking, our friends and relatives were still drinking, and we were a social family. And when you
Yeah,
stopped, it
yeah,
felt like there was a bit of a loss, and that was that must have been quite hard for you, because
yeah, yeah.
we had always been like that, and you'd taken this radical decision to change, to stop. Thank God you did, because it allowed me eventually to make that radical decision to stop. But yeah, talk me
It's an
through it. Talk
interesting
us through
one
it.
in itself. That is a good point. I'll come back to that because the way that other people around you react. I mean, you weren't too bad, but mum and dad were quite like, why have you given up? Like, why don't you just like reduce the amount that they were because they were losing something that like you said, we'd all come to rely on, and of course, no one really knows the truth. What they
No.
saw was the sort of facade, I suppose, that I was presenting to the world, which is, I'm coping with this, I'm okay, and we all have our various, challenges with alcohol. I've said this before. From an outside point of view, people probably would have looked at me and thought, yeah, he's doing all right. He's got his own business. He does coaching. He looks like he's got it together, but of course that wasn't the case, as we've explored multiple times on this. So I'll come back to that. But going back to the sort of how I dealt with the the not drinkingness of quitting alcohol. And this might sound a bit wanky, but the first thing I did is I sort of leaned into this concept of the moment. Okay, so I would very often check myself. I'd be out, walking the dogs. I remember quite vividly that experience in the early days, in the first few weeks or months. I'd be outside walking the dogs, and I would literally stop dead in my tracks and I would look up to the sky and just breathe and be proud of the fact that I wasn't drinking, and just remind myself that I wasn't drinking. And it was a real sort of it was a sort of good vibes boost into my soul. I'd just stop, breathe, and just say, well done, mate, to myself. You're not drinking. That's really amazing. And I think because partially the way that we operate, we get most of us spend most of our time either thinking and worrying about what we're about to do, or thinking and worrying about shit we've already done. And this idea of just stopping that and just saying, look, whatever about what I did before, and whatever might come in the future, Mark, as you sit here today, as you stand here right now, you're not drinking, and that's fucking great. Well done, you. That just self-coaching was really valuable to me. And that sort of leads into my second point. My second point was, look, quitting alcohol can be pretty overwhelming. It's like, really? Fuck, what? I'm not going to do this ever? I'm never ever going to drink again? That is quite problematic from a sort of managing that psychologically. So what I used to do, and I didn't come up with this, I read this in a book, but it really, really did help, is I would say to myself, look, I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I can't say for certain, but what I am going to do is I'm not going to drink today. How about that? I'm just not going to drink today. And that kind of day by day, okay, and saying it, you have to say it out loud. You can if you want to, but I would say it. I remember being like, I'm just not going to drink today. So if anybody asks, I'm just not drinking today. And this sort of leads me on to my third point, which is this idea of almost the longer you pretend to be the person you want to be, the more you become that person. The mask becomes the face. So what helped me a lot was living in the moment, stopping and just thinking, taking it day by day, not putting this big, long, overwhelming, long-term, pressure on myself to just be, sober forever. Of course, now here we are 10 years later, and wow. I don't drink, and I'm through that, I'm through that phase, but I definitely did go through it. And I spent a long time being really excited and proud and optimistic about the type of person that I kind of caught a glimpse of, that I knew I could be if I moved this shit out of the way, because it was getting in the way for me. It was stopping me from building the business that I wanted to build. It was stopping me from having the relationship with my wife that I wanted to have. It was stopping me from connecting with my children in a way that felt right and honest and truthful. It was getting in the way of pretty much everything. And so catching a glimpse of the fact that, that I remember a few times just like vividly going, really? What? I'm all right. I can't believe that I haven't got a hangover, or I can't believe that I can, I said last week on a business call, I'm going to do this thing. And guess what? I'm actually going to do it. I'm going to do it. And that, I'd spent 10, 15, 20 years just making excuses, or, not really leaning in, not really putting all the effort in. So I'll stop there. We can sort of round back around. But yeah, just a few things that I used that helped me. And they did work for me.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear your side of things. Mine was slightly different. I just wanted to touch on a quick point which you reminded me of actually earlier on, which is when I stopped, I remember having a conversation with our father, and he actually expressed disappointment at the beginning, because he was like, well, I find it sad. I'm not going to ever be able to have a drink with my sons again. And that was, weird. But I think he just comes from a generation. And what you said is so true. We hid the truth. Certainly, I think I tried, well, I did my best anyway, to hide the truth as best I could, which is what, all professional drinkers do. We become very, very sly, and that was one of the worst things about it, really. But interesting. So for me, well documented in this podcast, if you're just joining, my journey was slightly different. I had a rock bottom moment. I had that awakening, if you like, a realization where something happened. And for me, it was like, this just can't carry on. You've got to stop, and it's now. It's not tomorrow. It's not another day. It's this is it. So for me, there was a feeling of relief, actually. And I remember that sinking through me of, I don't have to do this anymore. And I don't know if other people have had that, and I'd love to hear in the comments if how people reacted or what they felt. You had it, yeah.
I didn't
But
almost
there
want to
you
say
go.
it,
I think
I had it.
I think a lot of people do. So for me, and again, I've mentioned this before. I set about making a plan, and that plan was had two parts, really. One was, what am I going to do over the next 2 weeks? How can I make sure that my time is filled with good things, with nice things, with things that do not involve drinking? So I'm not going to go to a party. I'm not going to go to a bar, obviously. I'm not, I might go out for food, but let's do lunch. And I'm going to avoid those situations. So what can you do in the evening? Well, you know what? You can go to the cinema. You can go for a walk. You can play board games with your children if you have children. You can go and see relatives. You can go and see people who don't drink. Disassociate yourself with the people that you drank with. You're going to have to do that, because there will be some fallout. There always is. Some of those people you spent time with them because they were drinking buddies, right? So those people need to not go, this isn't like a divorce, but in some ways it is. You just need to
You
think
might need some
carefully.
distance from them for a while, maybe.
Exactly. Yeah, and talk. So for me, I also fell back to sport. So that was a thing which, I like running. I don't necessarily run far, but I run regularly. And that to me is similar to your walking with the dogs. Just get out, look at the sky. This may sound really wanky, but it's not meant to. Get out, breathe, look at the sky. Just look up at the things you missed for the amount of years that you were drinking. There's so much to see. See family, talk about it. Just go into that mode of all these people that maybe I didn't spend much time with. They want to spend time with me, and sober me is the person they want to meet. And I actually also did something which, in a minor way, which I know is part of Alcoholics Anonymous. Not that I know a huge amount about that. I didn't go. I did think about it, but I didn't. Which is apologizing to those people you may have upset. Now, for me, it was really about that rock bottom moment, that evening that I had, where, cut a very long story short, I turned up to a work event and I was already very drunk. I didn't upset anyone. I didn't do anything bad, but it was me. My shame hit in such a huge way, and then I actually forgot to collect my children, which was the real icing on the cake. There's a video I've done where I explain the full story. To take a look. So I actually apologized to all those people who I met up with, and what was interesting was most of them sent back a jokey message saying, "Oh no, you just had a few too many. It was funny. You didn't upset anybody." Blah blah blah. But for me, I felt I had to do it. For me, I was so ashamed that I had turned up at an event at 6 o'clock in the evening, drunk when no one else was.
Just on that is a really interesting point. It's something I didn't do at the time, but actually, fun enough, it's something that I've been thinking about a little bit recently, and it's been kind of prompted, I think, by the relationships that I've got with certain friends now, certain people that I know and that I'm sort of meeting again. So maybe acquaintances through acquaintances. And
Mm.
what I'm realizing is that the person that I am now is so vastly different to the person that I was when I was drinking. And I feel like a lot of them, in some respects, are a bit surprised. They're like, this isn't quite who we thought you were, type of thing. And look, I think if I'm being honest about it, there are a few who probably thought, because you were a bit of a dick when you drank. There were you weren't quite you. There was, and it struck me that maybe I should just be honest with a few people, and so the ones that matter, just say, look, hey, listen, just look, I'm really sorry if I was kind of a bit of a dick when I was drinking. I was kind of lost. I was lost at that time, and I just just want you to know that I sort of didn't mean to be, but and that again, it's the ironic thing about alcohol that since I've quit drinking, I've found so much connection and joy. Sounds a bit wanky, doesn't it? But pleasure and enjoyment in
True though.
reading books, watching great films and movies, getting outside. We've done so much with our, like, we spend time in Spain. I'm in Spain here now. We've been able to do things that we weren't. When I was drinking, I thought you couldn't have a better time than the one you had when you were drinking. And it traps you in that mindset, which is why it's so addictive, that you're giving up that thing, but actually you're freeing it. Someone left a comment on the YouTube chats, which was great. And it was, I think it said, I gave up one thing to gain everything.
Yeah.
And that's a really good point. So anyway, sorry, interrupted. Went off on a bit of
You
a
didn't.
tangent.
You didn't interrupt at all. It's fascinating hearing your thoughts, and I agree. I think there are some people you look back and you think, God, there were situations where was I being just a massive twat, basically. But
Yeah, you probably were, by the way.
I
No,
probably was. Yeah, exactly. I know the answer to that. So already, but no, I think as well. I know this is a really touchy point, a difficult one, because everybody is in a different stage of their life. Some people can afford to maybe do more things than others, time wise, money wise, etc. But try and do those things you always wanted to do, or those things that you talked about doing. So I did like three things, I think, in that first year. First one was I booked a holiday to come and see you. You were living in Florida at the time, and I remember we came to see you in the September. I gave up drinking in the May, and that was one of the things I wanted to do. My kids were kind of young, and I was like, let's go. Let's just go to Florida. Let's go. We went for 10 days. We came to see you. It was a fantastic holiday. First holiday you and I have had together sober, and I kind of wanted to come, and because I knew that would be the best holiday ever. Because we're close as a family, but also because I wouldn't have to even think about drinking because I'd be with you and you don't drink. And that was a big thing for me. And that was a real great time. I had a lot of fun. And then I actually booked to take my kids to see a Formula One race, which is something I'd always wanted to do. It wasn't cheap. It was not as expensive as it is now. God, I looked at the price of tickets these days. Horrendous, outrageous, in fact. So, those were two things. And I actually bought a car. We needed to get a car. But one thing, another, I'm going off on a tangent here, but I bought a car. And I bought it on credit, by the way, and the car I bought was, for those of you who know cars, it was a Golf R. So it was a sporty Golf, and it was great fun. But the mad thing about it was the moment I stopped drinking, and the moment my wife saw in my eyes that this was it, and she knew, and it was it was a massive change, and she saw that. All those little things that I maybe would have hidden or kept or bent the truth, or maybe asked in a different way, I could just go and ask. I could just say, hey, we need to get a car. I'd like to get something fun. I want to, I'm thinking, and she was just like, that's fine. Yeah, if it's in the budget, then, why not? I don't think she would have been like that before. I don't think she would. I don't think I would have asked. I wouldn't, there's a massive change in confidence. You change. End of story. That's and all that comes at such a wonderful price. So there we go. I'll stop there. Anything you want to add, maybe? But
No, that's brilliant. I
yeah, I'm
think we
good.
should stop there. We've been going, I think, probably about the normal amount of
20
time.
minutes, I think.
Yeah, as always, there's so much, more to be said. But no, look, let's. It was a good conversation. It was good to sort of remind ourselves and everybody else as all the benefits, or as many of the benefits as we can remember on one of these podcasts. So no, all
Yep.
good. Happy to leave it there. As always, do us a favour if you can, subscribe, like, comment.
Yeah,
Comments are
please
great.
do. Please
Do all
do.
the
We
stuff.
we can see you folks are watching. We love the comments. We want to reach as many people as we can. And it's purely because we just feel we've both been through an experience. We're brothers. We feel that's kind of maybe unique-ish, and we just want to share, basically.
Yeah, it helps us and it
Yeah, it
helps
does.
others. So it's great. Perfect. Cool. Right. Okay. I will leave it there. As I always say, never quit quitting. It's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
It's goodbye from him. Cheers. Bye for now.